Hello and welcome to this video looking at subtraction and how we perform a subtraction calculation when we have a number with zeros in it, as we have across the top. So the first thing you'll notice is that I have put the numbers into their place value columns underneath one another, the larger number at the top, which is typically what we do the subtraction, depends on the calculation obviously. So we've got 9,005 subtract 4,136. Now we always start with the smallest place value column when we're subtracting, and in this case, as the green arrow shows, that is the units. There we go. So we will start by thinking about 5 subtract 6. Now obviously if we have 5 sweets and we try to take 6 away, we don't have enough sweets to subtract. So what we typically do in these circumstances is we go to our next door neighbor, we knock on their door, and we ask them if we can exchange. Now we say exchange rather than borrow because that's what we're doing. We're using our knowledge of place value. The problem here is that our next door neighbor, the tens column, there are 0 tens, so they cannot help us. However, living in a very kind, helpful street, they go to their next door neighbor and they ask if they can help. The hundreds column here, you'll see there are no hundreds there either, so they can't help. But again, they will be a very kind, helpful neighbor, and they will go to their next door neighbor and they'll ask the thousands column. And you'll see that in the thousands column, they can help. There are 9 thousands. So what we do here is we exchange 1,000. So that leaves us with 8 thousands. And that 1,000 becomes 10 hundreds because 1,000 is 10 hundreds. There are 10 hundreds in 1,000, and because the thousands are 10 times bigger than 100. So we've now got 8,000, 8,000s instead of 9, and that 10 hundreds becomes 10 hundreds in the hundreds column. So we've taken one of the thousands and turned it into 10 hundreds, and you can see the 10 hundreds, they're now in the hundreds column. And there they are there. Okay, I'll put it back onto the pen mode here. Okay, now that we've got 10 hundreds in the hundreds column, we can exchange one of those for 10 tens, because 100 is 10 tens. So we had 10 hundreds, we're going to take one of those away, and that becomes 9 hundreds, and that 100 has gone into the tens column, and 100 is 10 tens. And you can see in the tens column, we now have 10. Now that our tens column has got a value in there, it can help out the units column. It can help out its next door neighbor. So again, we will exchange 1 10. So that becomes 9 tens left now. We've taken one of those away, we've exchanged it. And that 1 10 has become 10 units, which means that we've now got 15 units. And you should be able to see the 15 units in the units column. Now we can perform our calculations. It's really, really important to remember that you can only ever exchange with your next door neighbor. And if your next door neighbor can't help you, they have to ask their next door neighbor. And if they can't help you, they have to ask their next door neighbor. You can only ever exchange with your next door neighbor. So we can go ahead now and perform the calculation. So let's take a look at our units column. We've got 15 subtract 6. What's the difference between 15 and 6? What is 15 subtract 6? 15 subtract 6 is 9. We're now ready to go ahead and look at our tens column. We have 9 subtract 3. What is the difference between 9 and 3? What is 9 subtract 3? It is 6. We're now ready to look at our hundreds column, and we've got 9 hundreds subtract 100. What is the difference between 9 and 1? 9 subtract 1 is 8. And that leaves us with our thousands column, and we've got 8,000 subtract 4,000. What is the difference between 8 and 4? How do you get from 4 to 8? 8 subtract 4. All of those questions give you the same answer of 4, or 4,000s in this case. That leaves us with our answer, 4,869. Now, a really good checking tool when you're doing a subtraction is to do the inverse operation. And what you should be able to find is that if you take your answer there, and if you add the number that you were originally subtracting, then you should get back to the number that you started with. In other words, 4,869, add, because that's the inverse, it's the opposite, add 4,136, should get you back to your starting number in black there, 9,005. So these calculations can tend to be quite tricky. If we look back at the working out that we've done in blue, all the exchanging, you can see that there's lots of annotations, and it's very, very easy to become confused when you're doing all this exchanging. So sometimes it's a good idea to use a different colored pencil or pen, if you're working in pen, just so that you can see the original number in one color and you're exchanging in a different color, like I've done in the example here. Let's look at a further example. Okay, we've got a new question on the screen. Across the top we have 3,004 subtract 878. Now you'll notice again, first of all, that I have used place value columns. Never a bad idea to do that, always a good idea. And you'll notice from the question that the number we're beginning with has 4 digits, and the number that we are subtracting has 3 digits. And that's fine, but it's very important that we've put them all in the right columns, which I have in this case. So same situation again, we always start with our smallest place value column, in this case the units. So again, if I had 4 sweets and was trying to take away or subtract or give away 8 sweets, I can't do it. I don't have enough. So typically we would go to our next door neighbour, we'd knock on their door, hello Mr. 10, and we would ask the tens column if we could exchange from there. The difficulty again is that there's no value in the tens column. But if he goes next door to his next door neighbour and asks the hundreds place value column if they can exchange, or they can help, again the difficulty here is there is nothing in the hundreds place value column. So the hundreds can go next door to the thousands, and they can ask the thousands if they can help, and here we have the thousands. There are 3 thousands in that place value column, so they can help. But remember, you can only exchange with your next door neighbour, and they have to pass it on. So let's change the colour of pen so I'm ready to go. There we go. Right, 3 thousands will become 2 thousands. There they are. And that 1,000 has been exchanged for 10 hundreds, because 10 hundreds is 1,000. So we had no hundreds to begin with, but we've exchanged 1,000 for 10 of them. So 0 add 10, we're going to have 10 hundreds in there, and we're going to move that one from the thousands column into the hundreds column, and there you can see 10 hundreds. Now that there are 10 hundreds, the hundreds can help us. So we're going to exchange 100. So we had 10 hundreds. Now we've only got 9 hundreds. And that 100 has been exchanged for 10 tens, because 10 tens is 100. There it goes into the place value column. That 100 has become 10 tens. Now that our tens place value column has something there, it can now help the units. So we're going to exchange one of those tens. So we had 10 tens, now we've got 9 tens. And where has that 10 gone? It's gone into the units column, because 110 is 10 units. So our 4 units have got 10 more there, because 110 is 10 units. And we have now got 14 units. Hopefully that makes sense. That might be the process that some of us need to practice a little bit more, and that's fine. So 14 units subtract 8 units. 14 subtract 8 is 6. Into the tens column. 9 tens subtract 7 tens. 9 subtract 7. How do you get from 7 to 9? 9 take away 7 obviously is 2 tens. Into the hundreds column. 9 hundreds subtract 8 hundreds. 9 take away 8 is of course 1. And then into the thousands column, 2 thousands subtract blank. 2 thousands subtract nothing. 2 take away nothing is of course 2. And that leaves us with an answer down at the bottom there of 2,126. Now, like the previous question, if we were to perform an inverse calculation, that's the opposite calculation, we can check our answer. So if I change the color of pen to black here, if we were to take our answer 2,126, and if I was to add 878, 2,126 adds, because that's the opposite, add 878, that should, if my answer is correct, take me back to my starting number. And my starting number you can see in red underneath, 3,004. And again, you'll see that the different coloured pencils or different coloured pens that I've used on the screen hopefully helps you to see what I have been doing along the way. Now I'm going to take a moment to show you a final calculation. These two calculations have had 2 zeros in the number. I'm going to show you a calculation with 3 zeros in the number, where it gets really difficult. We'll show you how to do it the long way, the difficult way, but I want to show you a really cool trick which makes a really difficult calculation into a really simple calculation. So let me just set the screen up for you. Okay, so we've got a new calculation on the screen. We've got 5,000 subtract 1,838. You'll notice again that I have my place value columns across the top. And what's tricky about this question is that the number we are subtracting from, it has 3 zeros. Look at that. Makes it very, very tricky. So if we start, as usual, to progress the calculation, we're very, very quickly going to run into difficulties. So let's make a start. Let's go 0, subtract 8. No sweets, subtract 8 sweets. We can't do it. We're going to have to exchange. The problem is that our tens, we've got nothing there. Our hundreds have got nothing there. We're going to have to go across to our thousands. So we'll show you this calculation performed the long way, the slow way, the tricky way, and then we'll show you a shortcut that we can do for this calculation. However, that shortcut we can only do, well, you can do it for other calculations, but it will only really help you in a calculation like this where the units digit is a 0. It won't really help with other calculations, unfortunately, but it will help a lot with this one. So let's do it the long way then, first of all. Good practice. So let's start with our 0 take away 8. We can't do, so we knock on our next door neighbour into the tens, but there are no tens, they can't help. So the tens go next door to the hundreds, but there are 0 hundreds, so they can't help. But our hundreds goes next door to the thousands, and they can help. So have a think about what we're going to do. We are, of course, going to exchange. So one of those thousands That will leave us with 4 thousands. And that 1,000 has become 10 hundreds because 10 hundreds make 1,000. Now that we have 10 hundreds, we can exchange one of those. That means we'll have 9 hundreds left. And that 100 has become 10 tens. And there they are. And now that we've got 10 tens, we can exchange one of those. That will leave us with 9 tens. And what happened to that 10? That 110 became 10 units because 10 is 10 units. 110 is 10 units. We can now perform the calculation. 10 subtract 8. What's the difference between 10 and 8? It is, of course, 2. On to the tens column. 9 tens subtract 3 tens. 9 subtract 3. The difference between 9 and 3 is, of course, 6. Into the hundreds column. 9 hundreds subtract 8 hundreds. 9 subtract 8. What's the difference between 9 and 8? It is, of course, 1. And then into the thousands column at the end. 4,000 subtract 1,000. 4 subtract 1 is, of course, 3. Now, once you've done the exchanging, the calculation's fairly straightforward. Where you might run into difficulty is with the actual exchanging, and that's an issue that some children find tricky to deal with until they have lots of practice at doing it. And if that's you, that's okay. It's okay to practice things lots before you get it. That's absolutely fine. Now again, you'll notice I use different colours so that I can see my working out, I can see my exchanging. And like the previous questions, I'm just going to change the colour of pen here. There we go. Like the previous questions, if I was to take my answer and if I was to add the number that I had originally subtracted, so 3,162 add 1,838, that should, if my answer is correct, take me back to my original number in blue there. Hopefully you can see it, 5,000. And just doing it mentally, I can see that it does. So my calculation is correct. Now we're going to look at this question one final time, and I'm going to show you a much shorter way to perform this calculation. So let me just set the screen up. Okay, you'll see I have the same calculation on the screen once more. 5,000 subtract 1,838. Now, this little shortcut we're going to look at, this will only help you if the number you're subtracting from ends in a 0. You can still do this trick with other subtraction calculations, but it won't actually help you. It only works, it'll only help you, and really help you, with a number that ends in a 0 like this. Okay, so what am I going to do? I'm going to take both numbers, I'm going to look at both numbers, and I'm going to subtract 1 from both numbers. So I'm going to ask myself, what is 1 less than 5,000? And if you're secure with your place value, 1 less than 5,000 is 4,999. So I'm going to replace this number with 4,999. Now, if I have subtracted 1 from the top number, I must also subtract 1 from the bottom number to make it fair. We've got to be fair with our calculation. So if I've reduced the top number by 1, I also need to reduce the bottom number by 1. So what is 1 less than 1,838? 1 less would be 1,837. So I only need to change the last digit in this case. Now that I've subtracted 1 from both numbers, I can just go ahead and do the calculation. 9 subtract 7 is 2. 9 subtract 3 is 6. Onto the hundreds column, 9 subtract 8 is 1. And then finally the thousands column, 4 subtract 1 is 3. So I have my answer of 3,162. Now if I show you the previous screen, 3,162. 3,162. But you'll notice the second way, the shortcut, was a lot quicker. But again, it will only actually help you if you're working with a number that ends in a 0, and it will only actually help you if you've got good secure knowledge of place value as well. Hopefully this has been good practice, good help. Again, if you don't get it first time, that's absolutely fine. Sometimes we do need to practice an area of mathematics before we become very confident with it, so don't worry, just keep practicing. Remember, with each question, you can check your answer by performing an inverse calculation. So that means you take your answer and you add the number that you subtracted, and that should get you back to where you started. And it does in this case, so the answer is correct. I hope this has been some help to you. Thank you very much for your time, and take care.